You know, making a financial promise is the easy part. Promising a pension or an insurance payout, simple enough. But actually keeping that promise, decades from now, when the world could be a completely different place, well, that's the real challenge. So, how do you possibly plan today for a future that is, by its very nature, a total unknown? I mean, really think about that for a second. How can any company guarantee they can pay you in 50 years? They have no idea what interest rates will look like, what inflation will do to the value of money, or even how long we'll all be living. This isn't just some academic puzzle. It's a massive, high stakes problem that actuaries have to wrestle with every single day. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to lay out the core problem. Then, we'll dive into three key tools in the Actuaries Toolkit: scenario analysis, stress testing, and stochastic models. And finally, we'll figure out how you choose the right crystal ball for the job. Right, let's start at the beginning. We're talking about the fundamental challenge of making these huge, long-term promises when the future is just, well, it's a blank page.
So where do you even start? Well, the first tool we'll look at is scenario analysis. And really, it's all about telling a few detailed stories about what the future might look like.
Let's look at the official definition. Now, a couple of words here are absolutely key: plausible and impact. This isn't about writing science fiction. It's about grounding your stories in what could reasonably happen, and then, crucially, doing the math to figure out what that future would actually cost you. And the process itself is actually pretty straightforward. First, you figure out your biggest risks, things like inflation or interest rates. Then, you build a few different what-if worlds. So, in one world, inflation is high, but economic growth is slow. In another, inflation is low, but growth is booming. Then you run your numbers and see how your company would hold up in each of those futures. It's kind of like a choose-your-own-adventure book, but for financial planning. And this is way more than just a thought experiment. Businesses use scenario analysis constantly to make huge decisions. It helps them answer those critical what-if questions, like how much cash do we need on hand to get through a recession? Or does it make sense to launch this new product given these possible futures? It's a vital tool for strategic planning.
All right, next up, we've got a tool that's built for the really, really bad days: stress testing. Think of this as the financial equivalent of a fire drill.
Let's look at the definition. See that key phrase, extreme but plausible? We're not talking about a little downturn anymore. With stress testing, we are deliberately modeling a full-blown crisis to see if we can survive it. And here's the difference in a nutshell. Scenario analysis might look at a mild recession. A stress test, on the other hand, models something like a 1 in 200-year market crash. One is like preparing for a rainy day. The other is like boarding up the windows for a Category 5 hurricane.
So why on earth would you run these fire drills? Because they expose the dangers you might otherwise miss. They're designed to answer tough questions. Where are the weakest links in our investments? What's the real damage if the entire market just implodes? And maybe most importantly, what happens when all our investments start moving in lockstep during a panic? Because let's be real, when a crisis hits, all the old rules go out the window.
And that brings us to our final and most powerful tool, stochastic models. This is where we stop telling just a few stories and start simulating millions of possible futures, all at once. The huge leap forward here is that these models totally embrace randomness. Instead of just picking a few paths for the stock market, a stochastic model uses probability to generate thousands or even millions of different paths. So it doesn't just spit out one answer. It gives you a whole map of the possibilities and tells you how likely each one is.
This quote really gets to the heart of it. The true power of this method isn't just about testing the scenarios you can already imagine. It's about letting the model's randomness uncover the dangerous combinations of events you would never have thought to test on your own.
And that incredible power makes it absolutely essential for certain jobs. If you're dealing with really complex financial products, things with all sorts of options and guarantees built in, you have to understand the full range of potential outcomes. A few handpicked scenarios just won't cut it. This is where you need stochastic models to see that entire spectrum of possibilities.
So, we have these three amazing tools in our toolkit. How do we decide which one to pull out? Well, it all comes down to picking the right tool for the right job.
This table really breaks it down perfectly. Scenario analysis is simple. You get a few clear stories, and it's great for planning. Stress testing is a bit more complex. It looks at a few extreme outcomes to test your survival.
And then you've got stochastic modeling. Super complex, but it gives you thousands of data points to map out every possibility. You're basically trading simplicity for more and more power as you go down the list. So if you remember one thing from all this, let it be this. These aren't competing tools. They're complementary. A really smart risk management strategy doesn't just pick one, it uses all of them. Scenario analysis for day-to-day planning, stress testing to prepare for disaster, and stochastic models to price the really complicated stuff. They all work together.
Which leaves us with one last big question. These tools are amazing for helping us navigate uncertainty and plan for futures we can imagine. But what about the ones we can't? What happens when the truly unthinkable scenario is the one nobody ever thought to put into the model in the first place?